Hello. Before we begin, we wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen are multiple application widgets you can use to interact with the webcast. You can submit questions to our presenters by using the Q&A widget, or interact with other attendees by typing in the group chat widget. If the slide deck has been made available for download, it can be accessed in the Available Resources widget on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. If you are interested in continuing education credits, please click on the Sign Up widget in order to specify your credit type. In order to qualify for CPE credits, you must stay logged in for the full hour and click on interactive prompts which populate 3 times throughout the webcast. A recording of this webcast will be made available 24 hours after the live session and will be emailed to all registrants. You can share this webcast with a colleague or friend by clicking on the light blue share icon. Finally, we appreciate your help in improving our webcasts. An evaluation form will appear at the conclusion of this webcast, and your feedback allows us to continually make better content for you. Thank you from all of us at the Conference Board.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Greg Morrow, Program Director with the Conference Board, and I'd like to welcome you to today's program, a blueprint for the flourishing workforce, the key trends, skills, and values required to rebuild in the next normal. This is a webinar that's a series. It's a part of our Employee Healthcare Pre-Conference webcast series. And next slide, Sean. Some of the critical issues and questions we'll be dealing with today include understanding the critical evolution of the mental health movement, identify how key unplanned organizational changes affect the immediate and midterm, navigate the radically different workplace of today and tomorrow, and activate a measurable plan to make every moment matter for your employees and members. And now I'd like to introduce our speakers. Zev Suissa is an award-winning producer and innovator, leading strategic imagination for big brands, publishers, and growth companies. In his role as Chief Innovation Officer at eMindful, Zev leverages best practices of engagement strategy, data-driven content production, and partnership value creation for large corporate government and health plan clients to deliver evidence-based mindfulness programs with proven outcomes. Amy Marlowe is a senior benefits specialist in HR at Metlife. She received a Master of Public Health degree from the University of Maryland and has been working in the field of health promotion and education for 20 years. In 2014, she established Metlife's global employee wellness program, Wellness for Life, which she continues to manage. Amy also has responsibility for oversight of the Employee Assistance Program and U.S. disability benefits. Amy, Zev, welcome.
Thank you, Greg, and hi, Amy. I am going to start sharing my screen so that we can see the full presentation here. And I'd just like to say or ask that once you see it, to please let me know. Can everybody see the presentation now?
Yeah, Zev, we can see it.
Great. Thanks so much. So as Greg mentioned, this is the blueprint for the flourishing workforce. We've all seen so many changes over the last year, and we have launched with Metlife before the pandemic. It's been about 1.5 years, 2 years now, and seen some immediate impact and changes right out of the gate. But then as COVID hit, we've learned a lot together and have really taken some great steps. So Amy, thanks for joining me today. I'm really excited to share some of the stories of success that we're seeing together.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to cover a little bit of ground today. And what we really want to look at is this mental health tsunami. Really, we're all experiencing this, what's happening. And then we're going to get into how that's been making changes and how we're all addressing this emotional health and mental health movement. And that's having some immediate but also lasting impact. So we want to look at what that workplace for tomorrow is and how that's impacting not just the work from home state, but benefit planning and how it's affecting corporate cultures and workforces as well. And as always, it's important to measure the outcomes and success of these programs. So we're seeing some new ways to do that. And we're going to share some of the data insights that we've collected together and from a book of business perspective, but then also what happens for tomorrow? What should we be measuring tomorrow as this evolution is happening? We encourage you to drop in your questions throughout the experience. We can address them at the end when Greg pulls back up the moderated session, and we'll get to anything that you might have that you'd like to know more about. So as we jump into the mental health changes and evolution, it's no surprise this is what everybody is seeing and feeling together already. But we've seen a couple of statistics here from McKinsey and NAMI that kind of pull it all out and highlight it, really what's happening, which is that 90% of our organizations are seeing an impact from this pandemic. And that's also having an enormous cost on us. So how can we go approach that? And as we look at the evolution in this tsunami of mental health, this was a framework that was released by the Global Wellness Institute earlier this year that kind of sums up very nicely where we are. And I think that it's very easy for us to look at this spectrum of a high degree of mental illness and a low degree of mental illness, right? But then there's also this other continuum about whether or not you are flourishing or languishing in life. And I think it's very easy in this bottom left quadrant to identify people and try to get them some pretty severe issues and get them the help they need. But it's also true that if they have high degree of mental illness, they can still work with coping mechanisms and strategies to flourish in life. Where most people anecdotally fit is in this quadrant right up here, right? We all want to live in flourishing with no mental illness, right? But then what's happening is that most people are sort of straddling this line. And through the pandemic, this has started to dip into this bottom right quadrant. And this is the hardest thing to deal with, right? Because you need to find the tools to identify what's happening. There's no mental illness per se, but you can still not be flourishing. You can still be languishing in your experience. And so how we help people in this spot, how we help them discover what's going on for them is a key issue. And Amy, there are a lot of things that you've been looking at because you've been seeing these trends just culturally as well. And so when it comes to this bottom right quadrant, are there things about this mental health crisis that you've been measuring? And what has Metlife done to sort of look at that change?
Yeah, so everyone at Metlife, from leadership down, I think from very early on during this current crisis, really recognized that we're in the middle of, like you called it, a mental health tsunami. Actually, at Metlife, every year, we actually measure employee and employer sentiment in our U.S. employee benefit trends study. And so I have some stats from that study that kind of reinforce what we're talking about here. Since the start of the pandemic, we've actually surveyed employees and employers around the country every few months. And in the summer, they delved very deeply into mental health and the impact of the pandemic on that, specifically on employees. So what they found was, not really that surprising, honestly. A lot of people are feeling stressed. 41% of employees said that they felt stressed, burnt out, or depressed. That middle figure, that's based on the burnout definition from the WHO. And 64% of people reported feeling at least 5 signs of burnout. And bear in mind that this was data from the summer. And I think we all know that has not gotten any better as the year went on. So that's something that I think is really remarkable, the 64% burnout stat. And then we also looked at sources of stress, including financial stress, and 81% of employees reported experiencing financial concerns, during that time. And that's, another main factor in the mental health of our population right now.
And so as you've started to pulse individuals, and this was in the summer and it's an annual trend, I presume that this employee benefit trend study is available for people to review in depth?
Yeah, absolutely. It's on metlife.com. And if you want to find it really quickly, you can just search for mental health and it comes up as one of the items there.
And there's some deeper insights you looked at when it comes to not only understanding that people are, I'm just amazed at 5 different signs of burnout. How many signs of burnout are there? And the fact that 64% of people are feeling that. But then how does that impact work, right? It's one thing to recognize this layer of there's a problem, people are in a prolonged period of stress, and it's having an impact, a pretty significant one. But what does that do for the workforce? What does that do for general productivity? And I think you all looked at that layer of information as well.
Yeah, so they looked at productivity and engagement. And so this slide shows the link between mental health. So, they asked people, how's your mental health? And so the people with better mental health also reported that they felt like they were more productive, and they also felt like they were more engaged at work. So, that's, pretty, especially the engagement, it's a big difference. And so we can really see the role that mental health can play in those aspects of our employees' day to day.
And so this is looking at productivity and engagement against mental health. And then you also looked at it on the converse side.
Yeah, so we also looked at the effect of resiliency on productivity and engagement. I think we have that slide. I'm trying to see it on my screen here. Yeah. So it was, kind of similarly, the people who were more resilient also felt like they were more productive and engaged. So, I think that this for us really reinforced, as I said earlier, it wasn't so surprising that, that these things are connected. We've known this for a long time. I think the extent of the mental health problems that people were facing was a little bit of a surprise, but this is really kind of a core part of our business case around why we do focus on resilience for our employees. We're a customer-focused company, like most companies, and we need our employees to be able to serve our customers. And especially in our line of work at Metlife, we have employees who are serving customers during their darkest times. They're filing life insurance claims. They're filing disability claims. They're out of work for an illness. And so we really need our employees to be engaged and productive. And so it just reinforces for us what a business imperative it is, to focus on these things.
And are you seeing sort of a critical mass of people experiencing these mental health issues? And then is that reaching a threshold of financial or operational risk that is now warranting a different level of concern or a different level of action, right, to address this tsunami?
Yeah, I think that this survey that, again, it wasn't just Metlife employees, these are employees across the country from many employers. But yeah, I think that this actually, shows us that we are at that critical point. We have hit that point where there is going to be operational risk. I think at Metlife, we've been talking about these things for a long time. And I think one of the reasons why we jumped on the mental health train real early was because we did, and our leaders did recognize, just like you said, that operational risk of having employees who are struggling in these ways, and what can we do to help them?
I think that's a very interesting trend, right? Where mental health has always been important. We've always wanted to take care of our workforces, and realizing that there's a financial impact or an urgency around it has certainly been accelerated this year when the critical mass of people who it's been reaching and touching is so much bigger. So we're feeling the impact a lot more. Yeah. And that's also unlocking a different level of importance at every level of the company.
Yeah.
We see a lot of the same data too. And eMindful's been around for a while now, and we've got over 12 years of data-driven insights around employee productivity and health and mental health. And what we've looked at, and this is a study that we did over a 10-year period, where we looked at measuring outcomes of two scientifically validated instruments, both the perceived stress scale and also the work limitations questionnaire. And very similar to the slides that you just showed, Amy, we looked at when you're stressed, you're not that productive. And what we found is that it's actually 21% of your productivity is directly attributable to how stressed you are. And we found that through our programs, every point that we've been able to reduce in people's stress, according to the perceived stress scale, has increased their focused performance by about 7 minutes. And that same point also correlates to about $96 in claims cost. And that was work we did with Aetna very early on to demonstrate the impact of stress and healthcare claims cost. And so when we look at the ROI of this formula, we can see that through our programs, 74% of the participants are reducing their stress. And when they do reduce their stress, they're reducing by an average of 7 points. And so when you just take that quick math, you're able to get to a very transparent formula for ROI, which shows that tangible healthcare claims cost dollar impact of reduced stress. That's around $700 per year. And then to the point you were showing about resilience and engagement and productivity, and what we showed in that correlation, if you can multiply that impact, it's 7 points reduction, 7 minutes improvement per point. That's roughly 42 hours per year, which you can multiply by an average salary and then get that softer cost of presenteeism, that productivity savings, which delivers a 9x ROI. And so what I think is clear from the last couple of data slides that you've conducted from a global book of business, and that we've also conducted from our global book of business over 12 plus years, is we're seeing that there's now a correlation between stress and costs that impact a business. And it's now reaching a critical mass that we absolutely have to do something today and do more beyond just checking the box. And Amy, you have now taken a lot of this data and insights into action, and you've developed, with some leadership support, a new strategy around what you're doing with this space. And I'd love for you to share with the audience today exactly what that strategy and what your pillars of well-being are.
Sure. So as I mentioned before, we have really thought about mental and emotional well-being for our employees. For many years now. It's been a core aspect of our global wellness efforts since the beginning. We had done in 2019, we did a global benchmarking analysis about mental and emotional health support specifically in 10 countries around the world. And we were kind of diligently going through our lists of gaps and opportunities when the spring of 2020 hit. And as our CHRO, Susan Podliger, called it, the perfect storm of stressors was facing us. And so what we did as an organization was we said, we have all these wonderful supportive things, but we kind of need a booster shot to just make sure it's getting in front of people. And we need to just make sure we're refining our strategy just to address the real relevant needs of today. So we launched an initiative called Be Well. And the real message of Be Well, it was really empathy and connecting the dots for employees. So the empathy message was, however you're feeling, we get it. We're here for you, whether you're coping with serious struggles or whether you're thriving and at all points in between. We wanted to make sure that, as you had showed that continuum earlier in the deck, all along the continuum, we wanted our employees to feel that support. So we have 3 strategic priority areas, and the one at the bottom, the clinical solutions, that's kind of, I feel that's kind of table stakes for a big company, right? We have the benefits that people need. We have EAP, we have behavioral health benefits, coverage. We had done some enhancements to that actually as a result of the 2019 benchmarking study. So we were in a really good position to really offer those, solid solutions for people who really need a level of support. But then the other 2 strategic pillars are equally as important. We have the leadership and management side, and we have employee engagement. And so on the leaders and managers side, we really wanted to empower our managers to be able to support their teams during this time. And we had all different ways we did that, and we can talk to that a little later. And then the employee engagement piece, it was a matter of really addressing the stigma about mental health and kind of continuing on that path, which we had, again, started back in 2019, creating a culture of caring, engaging employees in that culture, and also helping them to, like I said, connect those dots between these resources that we had already invested in, including eMindful, that people were using, but now there was this kind of inflection point where people really needed them in a new way. So we wanted to just connect those dots.
And when it comes to the leaders and managers and then employees, sometimes it helps to have a top-down approach. Sometimes it's just a groundswell from a culture perspective. Sometimes the employees make the demands, and this is what we need, or they're all in it together. How has it worked at Metlife, and where have you seen that cultural epicenter really emanate from?
Yeah, I mean, so it's really all of those things. And I think, without the top down, it wasn't going to be very successful, right? We needed that top down and we needed the structure around it as well. But we have just seen such a groundswell of interest and engagement with these things. And I think it's because of the work we did on the culture and on opening up the conversation and having mental health just be something that we as a company talk about with our employees, talk about with each other, role model. And I just think that all of those aspects together has just really, I think, connected with people. It's really resonated with our employees.
Yeah, and I think it's attributable to some of the steps you're taking to execute against this strategy and move it into the culture. And so you've done some interesting things I'd love for you to share with everyone around how to make this emotional health movement, not just from the top down, but integrate it into the other things that you're doing within your ecosystem. And I have to start with this very bold statement that we loved hearing, and it's how you really weighted your incentives. But everyone can see the quote here, and I'm maybe paraphrasing a little bit to say it, but that practicing mindfulness is as important as getting a flu shot. And when you think about making a cultural change, that kind of statement feels very bold. And Amy, I'd love for you to share a little bit more around what the statement is and how you're using it to drive a cultural impact.
Yeah, sure. So what you're referring to is a special wellness incentive that we created towards the end of 2020. We have an annual wellness incentive, like most companies, but coming up to the end of 2020, we were kind of looking at our data and we were looking at, just the environment that we're in. And we thought about, how can we really make sure that we're boosting employee resilience? What are the gaps or what are the needs that we're seeing? And when we looked at it that way, we thought, okay, we were seeing that there was preventive care that people had foregone because of the pandemic. So we were thinking in the realm of, preventive care. Let's encourage the flu shot, right? And to make sure, especially coming into this COVID fall, we were thinking about flu shots. And then equally as important to us, we were looking at, our employee survey data, or a lot of people were talking about things like burnout. We were hearing from our HR partners about just the stress and just how the isolation and the stress of the pandemic, it wasn't really letting up, as everyone knows, in the fall of 2020. So, to us, it might sound like a revolutionary idea, but to us, it seemed pretty plain. Like, we need people's mental health to be supported. And, we have this wonderful tool in eMindful that we can, that we have been linking people to practice mindfulness. And we believe that mindfulness is a tool that's really going to help them deal with these things they're talking about in our survey. And we also really need them to get a flu shot because, that's just basic preventive care. So to us, it didn't really seem that crazy, but I do think that employees, I think it did give some people pause, like, oh, wow, you're going to give me $50 for getting a flu shot and $50 for doing mindfulness, and putting it on the same par and in the same lens, I think was a shift for some people. And that's really meaningful.
I completely agree. Some of the data that we've analyzed over 2020 was demonstrating when and we looked at two segments, people who had been practicing mindfulness before the pandemic and those who started after the pandemic was full swing. And what we found was, not surprising that everybody's stress went up, but we found that people who had been practicing mindfulness before the pandemic were actually able to better mitigate the stress. They had built the skills of more resilience. So that when the pandemic hit, they actually were more okay. They were able to deal with it in a different way, change their relationship with that anxiety. And that very much fits in line. So maybe not as revolutionary. It fits in line with the flu shot, right? You're building through mindfulness practice preventative skills that will help you in periods of turmoil.
Exactly.
So when you look at the cultural changes that you've looked to implement, there are a few things you've done, and you built it around personal, cultural, structural changes. And what we're looking at here is an image of your learning management system that we've integrated in. And so can you share a little bit about how these three approaches fit into your overall well-being strategy?
Yeah, sure. So, we have to engage at the personal level, right? People have to, we can't shove mindfulness down into them. Like, they have to participate. So, finding ways to get people to recognize it as a need, to prioritize it, making it super easy for them to do. And also, as we've been talking about, really, I think the cultural aspect is so important, embedding it in your corporate culture. And also the structure, which kind of points to this image on the slide with the learning platform, because our corporate culture is very much focused on learning and creating, agility and a future-focused workforce, and supporting the learning needs of our workforce is very high on our priority list. So within that kind of culture of learning, we were able to integrate, and this was something we did very early, like January, February of 2020. We integrated eMindful into My Learning. So when you go onto the learning platform and you search for any of the terms that might connect to one of the eMindful catalog items, it comes up just like the Harvard Business Review, items, or the LinkedIn learning pieces that are connected there. So it does kind of, by embedding it in the learning culture and the structure, making it single sign-on and easy, we just kind of, again, try to connect those dots in a way that the employee, at whatever barriers are there, maybe we're helping them to overcome it and make that personal connection to the content.
That's great, Amy. It has to be frictionless for the employees, or they're not going to engage, right? We're not competing with maybe other mental health issues. We're competing with Facebook and Instagram and Google and YouTube, right? Those are the things that compete for people's time. And if you can make it frictionless, they'll get there. And what's really differentiated and why we love our partnership with you is that integrating it into the ecosystem, into the learning management system, gives people that contextual layer of the area that you're already promoting, and it goes beyond just a link to some app, right? This is a truly integrated experience where all of our content and programs, they're meta tagged to the individual episode layer, so we can split it out by category of interest, by health condition, by health concern. And so as people are engaging in the My Learning experience, they're able to get into that thing that makes the most sense for them in that moment. And that helps provide that structural component that you're referring to, about having a robust resource that they can immediately access with ease.
Yeah, and we really saw a lot of uptake too. I mean, our numbers have gone through the roof in the past year, so it's been really effective.
That's great to see. And it's not just about the integration. It's also about how we're shifting this focus in the culture, right? And you're getting the leadership support. And while we did show ROI, which is always important to look at, and I think we can all say that ROI started to drift a little bit into VOI, right? Value on investment. Like, are we getting people the right thing for their right resource? But what seems to be shifting through this period is the next evolution through the pandemic, which is not ROI or VOI, but VIP, value in people. And what a great time to celebrate people and that message. And so when we think about how to support this value in people movement, can you share a little bit about how leadership and other departments have taken that signal and approach to supporting people?
Yeah, sure. So, we definitely recognize that employee-centric, approach it's key, because our people, that is our value. I mean, that's what we bring to our customers, is really essentially our people. So, I feel like our partnership with eMindful, coming a few years before this mental health crisis, I think that kind of shows a little bit that we have long been thinking in this way, with like the holistic whole person view of our employees, and how we can kind of get, help them, to really realize their value in that way. So, the video that actually is on the screen now on the right, this was actually a video that, and I wish we could show it, but it was something that our leadership put together probably in the late spring. And it was the main message was really, we're in this together. You can kind of see that there for our people internally and for our customers. And, we're going to get through this Metlife, kind of like a pep talk. And one of the images that they chose, I wasn't even involved in putting it in the video. But from the leadership level, one of the images that they showed in this video was the eMindful screen, the homepage of eMindful, because I think they recognized that that's a proof point of what we're talking about being in it together and about valuing our people and wanting our people to be able to reach their full potentials, even in the midst of this craziness.
We were honored by that for sure. And certainly when mindfulness showed up in your annual report, really exciting to see that. And then the Be Well video on the left there, can you talk a little bit more about that video?
Yeah, sure. So that was actually our kickoff video for the initiative. And I think I had mentioned this before. The main kind of objectives of Be Well, it was empathy. And it was also connecting the dots for people. We wanted to really make it so easy for people to find the relevant resources that they needed. We were in a wonderful position where we didn't have to kind of find more resources to offer. We already had a lot of them available, but we wanted to put them directly into people's hands and just make it super easy. So this video was where we showcased our new curated collection of content that we made on our website. And we also just kind of got that message across, like, however you're feeling, we want you to be well. That was the slogan there. So, that was the launch. And I think we've had like 10,000 views of that video. And I do feel like it's really resonated.
That's great. So taking real steps from leadership to show value in people is important from the culture. And there are certain things you're doing to build in that permission amongst the workforce. Can you share a little bit about Mindful March?
Yeah, sure. So another thing that I'm seeing more of actually in the past year is this leadership support in a new way. I mean, it's really, people I think have really engaged with this type of strategy. And we have our chief HR officer this past week announced that March is going to be Mindful March for the HR organization. And we have many hundred HR representatives at a company this size. So it's a big organization that's observing Mindful March. And, she advised us to really be mindful about how we're spending our time and build those mindfulness skills to help us face challenges. So we were able to promote our eMindful tools. I promoted them through my learning, which was great because she also spoke about learning as a way to spend some time in March, being more mindful about how we're spending that time. We've also seen other things that have come out, like different leaders around the company sending notes to their huge teams, encouraging shorter meetings or, taking time off. There was a big PTO campaign in the summer, and it was really focused around mental health. It was like, you need this time. And for the leaders of the company to say, I'm taking time off and I'm doing this staycation. And it was a whole messaging effort where the leaders were really trying to walk the talk and show our employees that they do have, like you said, that permission to take care of themselves and to engage with these tools that we offer. And so I expect to see a lot more of that into 2021.
That's great. It really, leading by example certainly works. It's not about do what I say, not what I do. And so that value in people just for the leaders to share is a great thing. And you're, I believe, as part of one of those pillars of leaders and managers, helping to train leaders in recognizing burnout in a new way when they may be experiencing some burnout themselves, but then taking action and leading their teams with a different, more compassionate lens. One of the things, go ahead, Amy.
No, I was just going to say, we created all sorts of leader tools to really empower managers, people managers especially, to do just that.
And it's clearly making an impact. This is something that you had shared about some feedback that one of your managers received from an employee.
Yeah, so this was actually one of the verbatims that we looked at. I reviewed like over 3,000 comments in response to some of the well-being questions on our employee survey at the end of 2020. And the question was basically, Metlife supports healthy behaviors that contribute to my well-being. And what we saw in response to that question, Metlife supports my well-being, basically, was a lot of responses about managers specifically and the role of the manager in that. And this particular quote that I provided, it was pretty representative. I mean, it speaks directly to a certain aspect of well-being, like this manager encouraged this person to take time off. But then the rest of it is a lot of the softer skills that the emotional intelligence type of skills. And I think this really connects really nicely with some of the e-mindful content and skills as well. It's, being able to be positive and recognizing the individual strengths and building relationships and that inclusive leadership. And this was all in response to, does Metlife support my well-being? So I mean, I think we already recognized it, but this really helps to crystallize for us, that relationship between manager behaviors and employee well-being.
It's very clear, and EQ, emotional skills for the leaders, have been on the rise for years anyway, and just in time, right, for the pandemic. eMindful has been looking at mindful leadership for years, and one thing that we have that we've realized through this period is how that conversation needed to evolve. And about last April, we started doing biweekly pulse surveys amongst our participants, just to help us understand what was changing for them. And our content is new every day, so we're providing new set of skills based on real-time relevance. And some of this real-time relevance is understanding what do participants, how is their stress and anxiety evolving and changing? And last May, what we did was ask the participants, what do you need from your leaders right now? Because things were changing. And so what we found was that participants signaled they wanted two things overwhelmingly. And this is from our book of business. And of course, every one of our clients has their own insights that compare to these benchmarks, but this was the book of business numbers across tens of thousands of people. Stability and transparency were overwhelmingly the most important thing. And if you think back about the pandemic, this was still 2-3 months into it. Stability and transparency were obvious leadership needs for employees, followed not too far by compassion. And so as those skill sets have evolved over the year, we're continually producing content to support you, Metlife, and our partners around this reimagined role of the manager and how they're there to help lead people to get some of those verbatims and testimonials like you just shared. And these are done on a biweekly basis. The thing that we just produced was this diversity, equity, and inclusion survey, where we were asking people, have you seen things change over the last year since the events of George Floyd and the social injustice that's ensued, that's been so ever present? And fortunately, we saw that 73% of the respondents said, yes, they have seen a change. And when we asked them both what they have noticed that's changed, but then also asking people, what do you want to see moving forward? There was sentiments that reinforced this idea of value in people. And it was really around awareness and compassion and kindness for others. And where there was some little bit of lacking was in how there was this awareness layer that had grown and changed through the year. It's not always reflected into the policy. So still good news about some progress being made, but then also some work to see how we can make some changes through time. And so these pulse surveys, which we continue to do on a biweekly basis to provide insights, have helped lead to something that we're going to produce and release on the anniversary of COVID, which is coming up pretty soon on 3/11. And it will contain in it essentially a workbook, a blueprint, a playbook, if you will, that takes in insights over the last year talks a lot about what Metlife is already successfully doing in the workforce and what that defines for the workforce of today and tomorrow, but then also how to measure it in this new era. And so I'll give a little sneak peek of this is the table of contents here. And if anybody would like a copy of this when it drops, we'll certainly send it out through the normal channels. But I encourage you to reach out to us at sales@emindful.com, and we can get you in a first wave of the report as it comes out. And I'll give a little sneak peek of one of the ways that we are measuring this success in the new era. And it is really around this idea that mental health resources can no longer be just check the box or a link to some app. They really need to be integrated and more sophisticated. And one of the ways eMindful has innovated the mindfulness space to really be a thought leader for behavioral health has been to create the first ever framework of mindfulness skills. We talked a little bit earlier about building those skills as a preventative layer for anything that comes up, pandemic or an everyday moment. And what that means is that we're able to target skills based on a unique condition to get to flourishing faster, so better outcomes. And we worked with about 72 different subject matter experts to define what are the skills and sub-skills of mindfulness. When you're doing physical exercise, it's very clear. You're going to do push-ups or sit-ups or whatever your exercise is, your Peloton bike, and you know when an exercise is focused on a bicep or a tricep. And of the thousands of studies of mindfulness, we know it works. But what is the bicep and the tricep of that mental fitness? What is that skill that you're actually practicing when you're practicing mindfulness? And the way this comes into play is based on whether you have anxiety or depression. You're going to need very different skills. If you have anxiety, for example, you might think about something embarrassing is going to happen. And in that case, you want to teach a skill called turning toward, because it allows you to imagine those perceived threats without recourse and move beyond them. On the other hand, if you have depression, you might think something is caused by yourself and it's enduring forever. And so in that case, you want to teach them cognitive flexibility so they can break out of that rumination spiral. You might not want to teach them focus because they're already hyper-focused on the issue. And so what this delivers then is a targeted skill building exercise that can be used in behavioral and mental health that advances the space in a way that gets people flourishing faster. And so as we take a step into this new value in people movement and how mental health has reached the critical mass of importance with the understanding of the cost impact, we're going to need a sophisticated solution that helps people really mitigate those costs in a direct fashion, and it can't be generic training anymore. So we're really excited to work with our partners, and Metlife, thank you for your continued support of us. And I'm love that your early steps and insights into the space have played out well. I guess maybe I don't love that they're playing out, but it is great that you had the foresight to get the right plans and solutions and strategy in place to execute it. So thank you for that. And I think at this point, we'd love to hear about any questions that are in the space based on what we've shared. And I'll stop sharing and move back into the presentation here for any questions.
All right, Zeb, thanks. We have a bunch that came in. First, this is for Amy. Please elaborate on the tools and support for leaders and managers.
Yeah, so we created a full leader guide, and it had like a very brief business case, kind of why are we talking about this, just to make sure everyone could frame it correctly. And then we had a few really just key areas where we felt like managers could learn skills or have some influence, like how to create a really open and inclusive environment on their team where people feel like they can trust each other. How to direct people to the resources that we have available. So what those resources are, where they're found, what they're used for, And then we also had trainings. They were not mandatory, but we provided some trainings through our EAP on mental health fundamentals, basically for managers. So managers could feel more confident in having some conversations with their employees. And then we also put that content onto our learning platform.
Thanks, Amy. This is not a question, it's more of a comment, but perhaps, Zeb, this is something that you've had a little experience with that you can talk to. It's engaging engineers has been a challenge.
Great comment there. And I'll say that we've tackled that issue in a number of ways. And, we've been doing this for 12 plus years. So we've really developed some best practices in engaging different types of groups, demographics, what have you. And when it comes to engineers, we would typically frame this as productivity hacks or mental fitness and performance and effectiveness. Not really talking about it as mindfulness per se, but really using the right language that fits their strategy. The foundational skills are the same, but the words and the context can change. And that really is the foundation of our applied mindfulness approach. So we're not necessarily dealing with body scan, awareness of breath. We certainly use those practices, but our content really focuses on what do you do about an overwhelming to-do list? How do you handle financial stress? Are you having difficulty sleeping these days? Or do you have a missing sense of social connection now that you've been quarantined for 10 months? All of those issues that people really gravitate toward, and the things that are actually about their everyday moments, make a difference in how you position it. And engineers, they really respond to data. And when we can show them that we're measuring this, not just with secular approach, but also with data that makes a difference for them, they're going to see it and respond to the data and performance.
Excellent. Thanks, Seth. Question for Amy. Everyone is stretched so thin. Have you had any challenges in getting buy-in on mental health solutions like mindfulness from your leadership at Metlife?
I think actually it's because people are stretched so thin that our leaders have bought in to the mental health solutions, because I think also we tried really to position this from the very beginning as there's a business case, there's a business imperative. This is not just, another thing we're putting on your plate. There's a reason why we feel like this is going to play a role in your outcomes, business leaders. So I think, even though it's been challenging, some of the work that we did with Be Well was really, like I've been saying, to connect those dots. We've tried to just integrate things and make it as easy as possible so it doesn't take that much effort to engage with the stuff. But I think it's because of that feeling of, oh gosh, my people are really stretched. I better support them or, it's not going to be pretty.
Thank you. And I think this question is for either or both of you. What do you see as the biggest challenge leaders will face in turning to an employee-centric workplace?
Amy, do you have thoughts on that?
The only thing I would say to that, I have a feeling that you'll have a lot to say, but the one thing I'll say is it's related to the last question. I think the biggest challenge really is the balance between kind of performance pressures and meeting objectives and being able to continue to support employees and to look at that employee experience kind of at the same time. It's figuring out how to do that at the same time, serving customers and employees. I think that's the big challenge.
Yeah, I think it's somewhat of a counterintuitive thing when we're in sort of an always on mode, right? In our hustle culture that we have. But I think the moment you start to step back and realize that when you do take a brain break, when you do work on your resilience, you're actually more productive. And as opposed to like trying to work a 12-hour day, right? If you take the right breaks, you're actually able to perform that same amount of work, if not more, in less time. And I think that's I don't see it really as a challenge for leaders to have an employee-centric. I think that the rewards would actually become very apparent very quickly, and it is sort of a paradigm shift. And I think it's being forced upon us now because of the global pandemic, that it can't just be a nice to have. I mean, from eMindful's perspective, we've definitely seen the change from the CEOs and CFOs, where typically they'd take some sharp pencils, to how much can we really invest in mental health, where now it's becoming an absolute mandate and supported and talked about publicly from the C-suite. And so I think the change is already happening. I don't think there are remaining barriers, and I think the results are going to be very apparent, as you've seen with Metlife's results here. And certainly, there are other stories and data around how well it's working. I don't think the challenges are going to be around much longer.
Gotcha. Thanks, Zev. Question for Amy. How did Metlife help managers and teams adjust to working from home, and how has that evolved as companies are adjusting to the new normal, looking ahead to bringing employees back into the office?
Yeah, so at the beginning of the pandemic, we moved people. We're lucky to be in an industry where most of our employees are sitting at computers. So, and a lot of them already had work from home capabilities. So we were able to turn that around really quickly in March and have everybody, go to their homes. And I would say by April, we had kind of launched into a whole strategy around just that, supporting the working from home dynamic. And it was actually driven by another area of HR outside of wellness. It was driven by our learning team. But we partnered very closely from the very beginning, and they hosted basically coffee chats, like open forum. I think they called them manager office hours, where at the beginning, people could just kind of join a call. They would walk through some best practices for working from home, because this was the learning team, and they engaged with a lot of that learning content that we had available. And then they brought me in to talk about the well-being aspects, like how to stay healthy working at home, like how to engage in the tools that we have, what to be thinking about from that perspective. So it was a really nice comprehensive approach from the very beginning. And now those conversations have shifted, and we kind of continued that. But now that we're talking about returning to offices, we are talking again as a cross-functional team within the company about, what people are going to need in terms of support, in terms of the messages, and how we can kind of tweak our approach to, to kind of send them in the opposite direction back to the office.
Thanks, Amy. We have about 6 minutes left. Anyone has any questions? The Q&A box is towards the bottom left of your screen. Please click that, submit your question. I want to go to one for Zev. Zev, there was no shortage of crises this year, and the latest challenge organizations are facing involves the COVID vaccine. How do you work with your clients to help their population manage these evolving needs?
Yeah, so definitely an issue, and a lot of uncertainty right around the COVID vaccine, a lot of optimism, a lot of concern. It was actually one of our Pulse survey questions from a few weeks ago, where we looked at exactly that, where we asked individuals, how they're feeling about it, because many of our clients were talking about their vaccine rollout strategy or policy. And so we wanted to support them with those relevant resources. We're happy to provide those resources. If you reach out to us, we can get them to you. It was looking at, some people were exclusively optimistic about the policy, and other people were very concerned. But we found that 37% of them were mixed in their emotions, right? They were both optimistic and concerned. And so what we did then was to help provide some resources, some new resources around purposeful decision-making, dealing with uncertainty, issues that help build resilience, or give people the skills to help them through that period of mixed emotions. So it's been challenging, but that goes to how we try to stay relevant for individuals as well. Those are policies that are rolling out now, and we can help with very targeted program to support it.
Thanks, Zev. Question came in, says, I have people that are remote and a manufacturing group that does not have the remote option. How do we support both groups? How do we support the non-remote group where most of the managers are remote? I could repeat that if you need me to.
I think I have it. So our eMindful has been remote, doing telehealth style, virtual, live, interactive sessions for 12 plus years. So this wasn't a COVID pivot for us. We've been doing this since the beginning. So we have hundreds of hours of on-demand content. We also deliver over 5,000 live interactive sessions every year. And they can be delivered through a website, through an app, through a phone, we want to preserve all those entry points for where people can experience it. So if you have groups that are both remote and on-site, we're able to speak to them both. If they have a device that's connected to the internet, we can reach them, and they can be in these aggregated live sessions together or aggregated with all of our book of business clients. So it really, it doesn't have to be, in fact, we've actually seen, it doesn't have to be in person. In fact, we encourage it not to be, because some things that we've learned over the years are that when employees are in a cafeteria together, they are not going to share perhaps in the same way they would when there's that layer of anonymity that you have online with a screen name. And while the stigma is being broken and being replaced, you can't fit this idea of 10,000 people in a cafeteria together. So that really helps it to be scalable by doing it through the devices. There's also this sense of community where people engage in the live interactive sessions together, where they're able to connect with these groups around shared sense of purpose or on the particular skill that they're working on. And so while people are remote, while people are distanced, it allows them to come together in a connected fashion in the same way that virtual meetings have taken off. Again, we've been doing it for 12 years, but a lot of people have been newly exposed to that environment. And these sessions where they can work on their well-being really connect people in that community sense in a way that they might not have had access to before.
Thanks, Zev. Question for Amy. Was there anything surprising you learned from Metlife's 2020 Employee Benefits Trends Study?
I would say that the stats around burnout did surprise me. I did not expect it to be that pervasive because burnout's kind of like the last step, that you don't want anyone to reach. But I would say, honestly, not a lot surprised us at MetLife that we found in that study, because we had been thinking about these things for a while. And I think we were pleased in a way that the data does support, the work that we've been doing, and that we could bring that data to other companies that, that might not have really kind of embedded that business case yet into the way that they do things.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Amy. Just wanted to mention before we close that we have more in the series of our employee healthcare pre-conference webcasts. In a few days, we have Employer Solutions for COVID-19 Pandemic, a Viacom CBS case study. On the 9th, Prioritizing Mental Health Care in 2021. And then on the 11th, Building a Workforce Mental Health Strategy for 2021 and beyond. And on the 24th, One Size Fits All Healthcare is not working. Localized healthcare is the alternative to the status quo. Also, I'd like to mention our Communicating Employee Benefits conference, virtual, that's coming up shortly. And with that, I'd like to close things out. Amy, Zev, thanks so much for sharing your time and your work. We really appreciate your insights. And for all of our attendees, thank you so much for spending your time with us. A survey will pop up where you can rate the session, or you can click the survey icon at the bottom of your screen. With that, we hope everyone has a great day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Greg. Thanks, Amy.